A few months ago, I created a super simple website for remote jobs using Deno Fresh, Deno Deploy, an external third-party API, and it all works offline, and it even includes DarkMode. The site I created is called remotelyhiring.com. Now, there's nothing insanely special about this site. However, in my opinion, it does provide a ton of value considering that I created it in less than an hour. So today in this video, I will show you just how I built it and how you can do it too. So let's get into it. All right, so here we are. We're at remotelyhiring.com, and this is a job board for remote workers. You can work from anywhere, remotely hiring. Remote jobs. Okay, so it's powered by remotive.com. The only way to apply for the job is you have to click back to their website. Remotive.com, go check them out. This is not sponsored or affiliated with them at all, but I did reach out on Twitter a while ago and they said, hey, that looks cool. So I hope I have their blessing here. All right, so let's talk about the component quick. When I say component, I mean just one of these cards. The card consists of a colorful dot, which is randomly generated using a 3-line function, which we'll show you in a minute. A title, the company name, followed by the job category, then the company or job location, and then 3 tags associated with that. Marketing, Python, sales in this case. Okay, so here we go. We're inside of the VS Code editor and on the left side, and we're in the README file of the project of remotelyhiring.com. And on the right side, as you can see, we have the site running. Now, the site is not actually running right now, but I just wanted to show you that if I refresh, we'll get site cannot be reached because it is definitely not running. So what we're gonna do to start a Deno Fresh project is just run the Deno command, and we're gonna do task, and then we're gonna say start. And there you go, on the right side is running. I'm gonna turn this into dark mode. So the tech stack is comprised of Deno Fresh and Deno Deploy, as I mentioned. Deno also ships with Preact. It ships with Tailwind, if you like, under the project called Tailwind. And I'm using a dynamic sitemap, and I'm using Google Analytics. And of course, no site is complete without a bit of love. That's about it for the README and just kind of the overview of this. I think the first thing we're gonna do is just look at the tree here. So we'll start with the components, and I will go ahead and open this up bigger now. And so if we look here, we have a header in this layout component, we have a footer, we have a meta, which I'll explain in a second, and we have a nav bar. So in here we have typical things you'd normally see. We have an interface, which I think in this case, I'm gonna refactor this real quick, and I'm just gonna reference that into our types folder we have here. And I will go ahead and just drop it in here like so. And we'll import this because it does not exist. So we will update import from Preact. We do want to export this interface. So we'll say export here. And what that will allow us to do is if I go back into layout, now we can just remove this layout props. We can remove that from inside of this code. And now we're getting a warning. We can just import that from our types /index. And what's really cool with Deno and really all TypeScript projects is you can just get relative or absolute paths. And in this case, we're just gonna do it like this with a @ and a /types /index.ts. Now that file name is important, so don't forget that. But there you go. So we've refactored a little bit. We've reduced some of the props that were in here. We don't need them in here. They're only used in this file, and I like to keep my types in some structured form where I can go and just access that. So that's the way I do it. If you notice too, in this case, we are no longer using component children. We can get rid of that because we are now using that inside of this one here, inside of our layout props. Let me close this out so we can see this a little bit more. We'll get a little bit more real estate. We have export function layout, children, title, description, canonical, keywords, current path, has a nav bar, has a header, has a footer. Now, these 3 here are something I do in most layout components that I create because I like to be able to toggle on a nav bar, a header, or a footer, depending on the page. So for instance, I will show you if we go to another page, we'll go into routes and we'll go into the index page since this only has 1 page. Now we can go in here and we can say something like has footer. Let's go down to the footer. And we could say something like false. So they're just Boolean flags, I'll say. So now there's no more footer. I can scroll to the bottom, there's no footer, right? Because I said has footer false. Now these are what I consider feature toggles, and these are awesome for layouts and things like that. I like to be able to have that customization. So there's no detail page. If I were to click here, it goes to the actual remotive.com website. That's where the candidate would actually apply to this job. So let's go take a look at that. So I'll click on the technical product support specialist, and we go and see the details of that here. If there was a detail page, we would go into a page like this, and maybe on this page I didn't want a footer. So I could use that toggle to just sort of shut that off. That's the idea. In the meta component, let's take a look at that one next actually. The meta component is something I also do in all of my apps. It could be a Next app, could be a Python app, could be a Deno app, could be whatever app. And what I do with it is I inject a head component. In this case, I'm using the head from Deno Fresh in their runtime, and I'm injecting, say, a dynamic title, dynamic description, some keywords, some robot metadata, stuff like that. All of the meta tags, the OG tags, the Open Graph tags, the canonical links for SEO purposes, the site icons for the PWA, the sitemap, and I like to have that sit inside of my layout, and then I take props from the layout from, let's open up another page again and show you. So inside the layout, I like to inject some props that I pass to the layout. The layout gets those as title, description, all, et cetera, all of these, and gets passed down to the children here inside of the layout component. So I find that that works really great. It's really nice. I can also reuse this component in any React project. That's why, another reason why I like to do it. I don't like to mess around with SEO too much, meaning that I don't like to find out that I have problems with SEO after my project is built and deployed. I like to do it early on, right away, probably from the start. So one of the first components I build is a layout component. This is the structure I use. I use children, title, description to start. Then I'll add something like a canonical. I'll add keywords, I'll add current paths, I'll add the feature toggles as I mentioned, and that's kind of how I do it. Again, it's pretty simple to do a feature toggle. You just set a Boolean and then you say something like this, like has header, and then if it does, it shows it and renders it. If it doesn't, it will not show it. The current path, I'm using that because I do that for analytics, so I want to capture the current path of the full URL and then pass it into my analytics program. Now here comes the children, so we're wrapping it in a Tailwind class here. And just to add some extra padding and spacing. And then in the main semantic markup here, we have the children. So it injects the page. So really it's a super simple site. So now we're on the index page of it. So it's an export default function for all jobs. It's taking in some props, and those page props are the URL, the route, the params, and the data. And those are actually coming from Deno as just generic type of page props that you would typically get. And then I'm passing those props down here into data. And if there is no data, then show no jobs found. If there is data, keep on returning. And we enter the layout, we start to build the page here. Then we get into page wrapper, which is another component I like to use. I like to wrap everything in kind of a wrapper instead of just a bunch of divs everywhere. So I'll say page wrapper, and then inside of that page wrapper, I have something called a page header. And just to be clear on all of this, when I'm talking about this, the page wrapper is right above this child. So the parent here is page wrapper. So everything right here along this border right here is the page wrapper. And then we get into page header. So the page header is this remote jobs powered by Remotive. And then we have, what is this? The actual card. So this actually could be refactored right here. If you don't like all these Tailwind classes, here's a quick tip. We'll do a quick tip. Let's call this card wrapper. Actually, I'll close that and we'll bring it down here and we'll get rid of this UL. So we're replacing the UL with a card wrapper. So we'll say card wrapper. Let me just bring this over here a little bit. Yeah, it's gonna complain it doesn't have that component yet. That's okay. So now we're gonna grab this piece right here. That's all we really need. And we are going to go and create that component. And to do that, I'm just gonna grab, say, the nav bar or something and just use that as a placeholder. Card wrapper, right? That's what we called it. So let's go in here. We'll change some things around. We'll call this card wrapper. We really just have children in here. So I believe all we're gonna have is just children. But for now, I'm just gonna paste this in like that. And in here, we're gonna call children. And we're gonna fix that there. And then here, we're gonna need to identify children. So we're gonna put in children here. The props are gonna be children. And yeah, we won't say any, we will type that out. The layout had those children. And the way we did layout here was just children, but layout props, which was the component children is what we need. So we're gonna go grab that and we will say, where did that component go? This one. Instead of children any, we don't like any, so we'll say children component, and then we'll bring that in from preact. And sometimes that creates a whole path. We don't want that, we just want preact. Okay, so then now that gives us the ability to clean up some code here, and we've created the card wrapper component, and really all it's doing is just taking this. So that way, what I was saying is if you don't want all these Tailwind classes everywhere in your app, this is a great way to do it. Break your things into smaller components. And now I can import this, right? All we have to do is import that. And now we have our card wrapper, easily identifiable. We can bring in the component here. Now we can easily understand that the card wrapper, this is obviously a card, right? So it really consists of a card wrapper, static HTML. Then it does its sorting stuff, sorts on the jobs that we're fetching down below, which I'm gonna get to in a second. Then we slice some data. We only grab the first 50. Then we iterate through it through a map function. And then we're really injecting the job into this card, which we would go to. The job list is actually, we're taking those props. This could all be refactored a little bit cleaner too, I think. And then we're destructuring the job. And then we're just creating a list component that contains the card. Here's a dot component that was generated in the random color, as I mentioned before. We'll go and take a look at that. So it's just an SVG that's kicking out the dot. Let me show you what the example looks like. So this is just an SVG over here on the right side. If you look there, it's a circle with an SVG, and it's 50 pixels by 50 pixels. And that just takes a dot props, which contains just a fill, which is a hex color of a string. Really, it's just a string. And then it just randomizes it through a function I created called random color. Let's open those up. And this is a function that generates a random hex color string. So we're exporting function random color, return a hash sign plus math.floor with math random on it times a number to string, which kicks out the 6-digit hex code. And then what else do we have? We have a title. So here you go, job title, right? So this is the H3. And then we have a description. And then below that, we have the tags. But that's about it for that. It's pretty simple, like I said. Let's go back down now to see how I'm fetching the API. So in this case, Deno comes with a handler, which is really cool because you can put this on a page, and similar to Next, you could do all of this with, get server-side props or get static props, all of that. Well, with Deno, you could do a post, you could do a get, et cetera, et cetera. And you can do that all within the page, which makes this very flexible. You can even have multiple. You could have a get first, right? Get some user data maybe, and then maybe you go and call and do a post on something. So it's really cool for that. But this is how simple this is. I'm using a get, and I'm doing a const endpoint equals the endpoint, and I could also break this out into an environment variable or something. And I'm fetching this API for remote jobs. So let's go take a look at that real quick. Just click on that and go look at it. And so this is the API that I am, all right, it's too big to see, but it's just HTML, and that's about all it's doing. It's kicking out the job description. I didn't want to put the job description on this page. I just wanted the title. I wanted it to look a little bit more simple to digest. And again, I could click, and then maybe from the click, I go to a detail page, but I didn't want to use their markup. I didn't want to strip away their markup. When I say their markup, I mean they include styles and they include paragraphs. I want clean HTML. I don't want the markup. But again, I think this was the easiest way to get this job done in under an hour to build this entire app. And then we're taking the response and we're grabbing the endpoint, we're fetching there, and if there is no response, then render nothing. In this case, I could also say render, send it to the 404 page, something like that. And then we're returning the jobs as JSON, and then we're rendering it out to the page as a prop. So we're taking in the ID, the title, the description, the URL, the company name, the company logo, the category, and tags as an array. And that data comes in here and then that data goes through here. Then I'm limiting to 50, as I mentioned. I'm mapping through them, and that's about it. The jobs populate out as this fetch happens on this page, then it comes out and it kicks it back into the render on the screen. We can go through the rest of it. There is a ThemeSwitcher island. If you're not familiar with islands in Deno Fresh, island architecture only renders JavaScript when an island is called. So the interactive parts here, I need this to set some state. I'm setting state on the toggle, and I'm setting state in local storage to set a dynamic class to turn this from dark to light mode. So super helpful that this thing is super quick, which we're going to show you in a second, but the only interactive JavaScript that's on this entire page is this toggle here. So that's super cool. So that really speeds things up. The rest of the site is static. Now, also, if this component fails, then it only fails here. It doesn't give you a problem anywhere else on the page, which I really love this architecture for that matter. We're gonna close the components and just kind of look at what else we have here. I have a SiteConfig, which I do often in most of my apps now. And the SiteConfig is a little generic, but it's a TypeScript const that I just basically use to set up things like navigation links. If there was navigation, you would have an ID, you would have a name, and then its actual path. In this case, I took this from one of my other projects, so this isn't even relevant. We don't need this whole thing. I can remove that. But this would be like one place to configure all of your text and your links. You could also connect this into a database or something, right? And control it all from there. So you can see how powerful this could be to sort of white label things. This one too, so yeah, this SiteConfig, I'm only really using it in this case for, let me delete these, see if that breaks anything. It may. Yeah, because it's required. So I think in this case, I'm gonna go back here and I'm gonna remove those requirements. I'm not using these. Yeah, I actually will delete those. And then we will go back to our SiteConfig, and now we're in the green again. We're not causing an error. So really all I'm using this SiteConfig for is the title, the description, the intro, and the host name. And so what I mean by that is a job board for remote workers right up here is coming from this text right here. And so I call siteconfig.description to be able to populate this. Same with something like the footer. Maybe you have a copyright thing and you would just want to reuse the same white labeled name everywhere else. I do that all the time. Super helpful. Something I love doing. I create a config file and just kind of put in the variables I'm going to need, and I go and build my site that way. That way I don't have to type twice either, because TypeScript will auto-populate everything. That's the config that I use. And then we have some helpers, which I think I showed you already, just two little helper functions that one generates a random color and the other one sorts the jobs by ID, or any really thing. It's just sorting by one value to another value. Nothing special there. Then we have a 404 page, just a normal page with a layout component, as I mentioned. Let's just see what happens if I do that. There's our 404 page. And you can see it dynamically generates the path. Deno actually can provide that for me, so that's super powerful as well. The same thing happens with the 500 error. I can't really cause a 500 error right now, and there are none, but this would be the same thing. A server error would happen here. And then we have a dynamic sitemap, which just takes the handler, it uses an async get, and it grabs the sitemap from the manifest of the root of the Deno project, which looks like this above here. So it takes all of the routes and takes all your islands, and then it puts it into a manifest. And from that manifest, we can create a sitemap. So if we go now to sitemap.xml, we get this, which really has nothing because it's just a home page. So all we're getting is here. But if I do turn this into having a job post with detailed pages and categories, you can imagine that this would be wonderful to have dynamically written. And so that's the concept. And then we have static files, which is mostly for the PWA, the Progressive Web App. Then next we have types, which we've covered. And then we have a utilities folder, which contains the Google Analytics configuration, which I will not be going over in this video, but it just connects your Google Analytics so you can track your site and its performance. And then lastly, we have a Tailwind config. This is part of Deno. The only thing that changed is I added dark mode. That's really all that changed here. And there you go, just like that. You got a cool looking app using Deno Fresh, a third-party API, Tailwind, all kinds of fun stuff. And it's super simple to build. Will I give you this code? If you subscribe, like, share, do all those things, yeah, I think I'm gonna do that. Why not? Sharing is caring, and I care about you. So thank you again for watching. I've been Eric, you've been awesome, and I'm gonna see you in the next video. So you can check all those videos out over there. They're gonna be great. There's React Native, there's other Deno projects, there's all kinds of fun stuff in there. So go check it out.